Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here with Mirella Masella, and we're going to talk about her history, her roots, and about her fabulous book, Through a Child's Eyes. So welcome, Mirella. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
My pleasure. So before we start talking about the book, just a little bit about, why did you do this research? Why did you write the book? Where did you get the bug?
My parents are from the southern part of Italy, in a tiny little village between Rome and Naples called San Pietro Infine. As children, we always went there to visit the village, and the backdrop is the old village of San Pietro, which was destroyed in 1943. So stories were always told of what happened in the war, how they survived. And I started to get really interested in my early 20s. And whilst my father was talking, I'd write everything down so that I wouldn't forget what he was telling me, because he would give me dates, he would give me what he went through, what my mum went through. So I just started jotting everything down. And before I knew it, in my mid-20s, I had this big diary. It's like a diary, memoirs. And I thought, right, I'm going to get this published. And I started to delve deeper, asking families that he mentioned. I started to write to them, started to speak to them. I said, can you confirm what my dad was saying? And they said yes. And I got legal documents, I got war documents to prove that my granddad was in the army. Because he went to Albania during that time of the invasion in the village. And that's when it all started. I just started to dig deeper and deeper. And before I knew it, I had this manuscript in my hand.
That's great to do that. I wish I had done something like that, but that's what I tell people, who want to start. They ask how to start. I said, ask grandma or ask grandpa. Just talk to them and they'll tell you the stories.
But they always told me, like my grandfather just used to say to me that he was a cobbler as well as a farmer in the village. It was a farming village. So little things like that. And I'll just write it down, kept writing it down. And then when they started to talk about the invasion of 1943, as soon as they said that they hid in the caves, people were running around in a frenzy because of the bombings. I thought, this is a story that has to be told. Especially when children involved. So many of them. Dad, what was it like in the caves? He said it was smelly, it was dirty, it was foul. We were hungry children.
Did he talk to you about what life was like before the war, or did your grandparents talk to you like what life was like before the war?
Yeah, so before the war, the village was medieval, it was vast, the population was over 1,400. They were just minding their own business, doing farming, selling their wine, their food that they made, the biscuits. It was busy. People were doing really, really well. They had beautiful houses. And he said that he remembers being with his grandmother all the time. My father, his grandmother, she looked after him while his parents went out to farm the land. So he remembers that. He remembers being busy, going to the piazza, sitting with his grandfathers, and while they were chatting, while the mothers were cooking. Washing at the fountain, which is in the book, where it describes this pool of water. The water comes down from the mountains, and that's how they used to wash their clothes. They didn't have any washing machines. And he remembers all that. He remembers them washing their linen, their clothes. It was busy, it was thriving. And then after November 1943, it changed.
Yeah, very, very. It was very, very sad to see that. I watched the movie by John Huston, but the San Pietro was kind of like the I guess the jump off point for the larger battle in Monte Cassino. I guess they felt that they had to take San Pietro before they went there. I'm trying to get the good question. What did they say about when the battle started? What did they think was happening?
They had warning that something was going to happen, but they didn't realise it was going to be that the village was going to be taken over by the Germans. They were warned, but they didn't know when, because they got the warning early September of 1943. So everyone knew that there was an evacuation procedure, that they would have to either meet at the fountain or go into the caves, which is sort of higher up into the village. So they were warned, but when it happened, I don't think they were prepared. They weren't. Who can be prepared for that? They were just told to gather their food, blankets, look after the elderly, the children. There were pregnant women as well, and all the men that were healthy, that were strong, able-bodied. Some of them were hidden, so that they weren't used for labouring jobs for the German soldiers. So they were warned, but I don't think they were prepared. I don't know if they were prepared enough. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. So before that, then, even though the Germans were occupying Italy, I guess they were allies, so they kind of left them alone. Is that what happened? And then,
But in the village,
yeah,
no, they told them to leave their home, quickly get their belongings, and try and live in the caves and be safe, because it was being invaded. There were bombs, there were planes in the air, and so they had to seek shelter and be safe. And there was in the book it mentions about not having water. They had to find water, and they were when it rained, they tried to get rainwater. When it like my grandfather, he tried to ask a well owner for water, and that's when an argument broke out.
it must have been terrifying. My mother's brother, when my grandparents went to America, they left him behind with his grandparents in 1915. So he grew up in Italy. He never left until 1950, when he came to America. And my cousin did interview him at one point, and he talked a little bit about what it was like in Bari, which they lived in Torito, which was a small little village, and they weren't really bombed or overtaken or anything like that. But my cousin that I talked to did say that she remembers, because she was about 10, I guess, at the time. She remembers running out of the village when they were bombing the city of Bari, running into the fields outside the village. And then, like you said, they had a plan or an escape route. If the Germans came, or if there was bombing, they would run out into the fields to be safe. And my uncle actually didn't have to serve in the war, because he had served before that. And when the war broke out, he had, I think, 3 or 4 children already. So he didn't have to serve in the Italian army at that point.
Because that was my grandfather. He had 3 children. 1, 2, 3 children, and then he was called back from Albania to go home, because my grandmother had a 4th child, so he was exempt from carrying out any more army duties.
Oh, so even though he was in the service, I remember reading that in the book. So even though he was in, because your grandmother had another child, he got sent home.
So he got a telegram and said to return home, because his wife had a fourth child.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
See, the thing is, I found when I was growing up, they would tell me these things, and some of it did go over my head. And then it's not when I was older, and I started to think back. I thought, hold on a minute, I was told this. I was told all this information. And it's not when you start to dig deeper, you think, oh my goodness, he was in the army, and he didn't enjoy it there. He wanted to go back home. He didn't enjoy it at all. He was scared. He was in Albania. He was frightened. But he did. He went home, and then he had to face the invasion of the village. And it was hard. So I went back to San Pietro this year, and I met a man. I've forgotten his name. I met a man, an elderly man. He's in I can't remember how old he is, but he said to me that his mum gave birth to him in the caves when they were kids. And he goes, I'm sure it was him. He was named after an American soldier who helped his mum give birth.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
That's love to see your information's coming up all the time. And when I saw him, I just thought, oh my God, that's just so amazing that I'm standing next to you and you were born in the caves.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Yeah. And so how long did they actually live in the cave? So,
my father said it was about the invasion lasted about 6 weeks.
Wow.
But they were in there for probably just a bit less than 6 weeks. But when I went there this year, I took my daughters there, and I said to them, go in the caves and try and get a feel of how these villagers felt. It was awful. It was dark. It was smelly. You couldn't even stand up. The height of the caves was so low. And they were by that drop. In the book, I described that the caves had this drop that if you stumbled backwards, you'd fall down because it was so high up. But they didn't like it. They would not go in. So I said, can you imagine your grandmother were in here.
Lived there.
All of them were in there trying to survive.
Right. And how many people actually were in there? How many people?
Hundreds.
Wow.
I'm not sure of the amount, but they had to cram themselves in there.
Yeah. See, these are stories nobody hears.
No one hears. Yeah. No one hears. My mum doesn't remember it. Well, my mum passed away. It would be 10 years February. But when she was telling me the story, so that she remembers her mum because she was 3 years old at the time. So she remembers her mum vaguely. And she remembers a little bit of chaos going around in the village, but she doesn't remember too much because her mum died after the invasion. And Enriqueta, she died in 1944. Because this year, because I see pictures this year, we put the plaque up.
Yes, yeah.
Where grandmother died because she stepped on a landmine. So she only remembers her hair being plaited by her mum at the age of 3, but she doesn't remember much after that.
That's it. Yeah, that was a sad story because that was your mom's sister that stepped on the mine.
It was my grandmother's. It was my mum's mum. But again, with that story, I had to get the facts right because I had an idea of where she died, where she stepped on the landmine after the soldiers cleared all the booby traps. So I was told that where she died, but I had to find the exact place to put the plaque. Erect the plaque. And it was blessed by the village priest this year before it was put up on the wall where she died, by the fountain where the women used to wash their clothes.
Yeah. And so now the village was never rebuilt per se, right? It was kind of moved. Is that the way they set up? People just relocated to other places?
Well, the villagers wanted the village to be rebuilt, but it never happened. So what they did was that you've got the old village situated on the mountain, and then just below that they built the new village of San Pietro, which doesn't look as pretty as the old.
Of course not. Yeah.
You haven't got the cobbled steps. You haven't got fountains all over the place. Lots of the piazza. There's only one church, where in the old village there was about three churches. It wasn't as big and wide as, and it didn't have the old stones, the medieval stones, the architect. It wasn't there anymore. So
yeah.
But you can still see it. If you go to the old village, the backdrop is the old village. You can still see the outline of what it would have looked like.
Yeah. It's that, that was very sad too. So now, why did your parents choose to go to the UK?
So my dad, my parents got married August 1959, and my dad wanted to do more for himself. He didn't want to carry on being a farmer. He's worked as a farmer for so long. He wanted to better himself, and he got married to my mum in August. Said to her, "Look, let me try London. If it works, then he'll get my mum over to England." He tried it, and then 3 years later, my mum immigrated to London as well, and that's where he stayed. My dad's 85, and he goes back to Italy for a holiday, but he never returned to live there. And he did really well for himself. He worked hard and made a success here.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, did he choose London because he knew people there, or because it was closer to Italy, or?
There's a big population in Clerkenwell, North London, with Italians. They've got St. Peter's Church in Holborn, Clerkenwell Road, and the population of Italians is big. And he knew that was there, and his sister was over as well before him. So she settled, and then my dad thought that he'd give it a go, and he went over as well. So he did know of people here, and that helped. And
that was kind of, I mentioned when we were talking earlier that my friend Andy's mom was from Italy too, and he said the same thing. He said, and he had never mentioned it to me before, but I guess outside of Woking, there was a large Italian population too. And when his mom came, she didn't speak any English at all. Mm-hmm. She arrived by herself, and he said, she was kind of like just got there and was lost until she found a way to where she was supposed to go.
My mum was, my dad was the same. He came with his little suitcase, which I've got. I've got his suitcase. Because he was going to give it away. And I said, "Dad, what are you doing? I'll have your first suitcase that he's ever had." And came over with it, so I've got it. He spoke no English, not one word. And he picked it up quickly when he worked in a hospital. And then when my mum came over, same for her. So she even though she mixed with the Italian mums and the community, she did really well with her English. She worked at Mother's Hospital in Hackney, and she made friends with some Caribbean people, and she actually picked up their accent. as well. And it was just so sweet. It was
Cool.
like,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a Cockney accent, she picked up a Caribbean accent. I said, okay, that's fine, that's fine. Yeah. But
That's funny.
they did
That's
well,
very funny.
considering they had nothing. You know, they made a really good life here in London.
Yeah. So now you were born in London, but
Cool.
that was like I guess the second part of the book. You, I guess your parents sent you to Italy for a while, yeah, to
They
spend time
did.
with the grandparents.
They did. I don't know. So I did say to them, I said, Mum, Dad, why did you send me to this? Is it because I was a bit mischievous? Was I a bit cheeky? And they said, no, we had to think of our work, and we had to think about buying moving on, getting a house. I said, okay. But I built up a really good relationship with both sets of grandparents. Nonno Benedetto, grandfather Benedetto, grandmother Maria, Antonia Serafino. I was probably sport rotten. I think what I was, because my sister said to me that when they came to pick me up a year later, I wasn't the same little girl anymore. I was a bit cheeky, and it was because I had the attention of both sets of grandparents, and all they had was me. But I do remember it well. I remember the aunties and uncles that would spoil me, I guess. Yeah. There was a time when they picked me up a year later when I went there. We went back a few years later, and from then on we used to go back all the time to the village. And it's not until I got married, had children, then there was that gap again. But I'd still remember everyone. I would not forget a face or a name. And they'll tell me what I was like when I was there.
I mean, so how old were you?
I was 4. I was about 4 years old, because I stayed there a year. Then the following year I started primary school. So, but I remember going to my grandparents' land. I remember their donkey.
Yes,
things
you
like
mentioned
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the donkey. And I remember my grandmother Maria just working so hard, because I used to make broom heads and out of straw. She would cook, clean, tend to the land, and then she had to deal with me as well in the middle of it all, this crazy little child. But she was lovely. I did send a picture, because she was very petite, but she was strong, so strong. And this year when I went to the village, I met her nephew, who I hadn't seen for about 37 years. And we were talking about her, saying even though she was 4 foot nothing, she was amazing, strong woman. And it puts me to shame, because she worked so hard. Yeah.
Well, and that was the sense that I got when I was there. And I don't know how it is there in the UK, in America. I grew up, if somebody asked me, what are you? I would say Italian. There was no such thing as Italian American. We would just say Italian. Both my parents were born here, but both of them had brothers and sisters that were born in Italy. But that's the way you answered. You said Italian, now it's Italian American. Obviously, when we went there, we're Americans. They see us as Americans. And,
that's right.
But I got the sense that their work ethic, their sense of being is so different than us, at least Americans anyway. There's a pride in their history, the pride in their work. I mean, it was totally different than what I expected.
Yeah, so what you're saying, when I go to Italy, they call me the English one. You're the English one. And because, the English one. And then back here in England, I say, yeah, I'm Italian. My heritage is Italian. But back in the village, they would be quite mean, actually. They used to call me latte, milk, because yeah, I mean, I've been away, I've got a bit of a tan, but they used to call me latte. You're so latte, it's latte, say come latte. And I said, well, that's me. We don't get much sun in London. Oh, my God. Oh, dear.
They don't get much sun. I moved there with without my wife to London and or to Bournemouth. And I was there, I got there in September. And it was, it was nice. The weather was good and everything. But I remember that first January I was there, that it rained 29 out of 31 days.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I couldn't believe it.
Oh, dear.
So it's quite interesting when you hear people that, they left that beautiful Italy and with the sun and everything and but that's funny that they called you latte.
They called me milk because I was pale. I said, okay, fine. But I said, I'm not latte. I'm not, milk.
But yeah, that was the thing. And even the, we didn't meet every old person in Italy, of course. But, my dad's cousins, they were in their 90s and they were peppy. They were, cooking and, all that stuff. We met in Avellino, we met Liberatore, 96 years old. And he was playing the accordion and singing and dancing. And I was getting tired watching them.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I met my dad's cousin this year, so she would be my second cousin, and she's, bless her, she's lovely. And so she was there at my sister's birth, because my older sister was born in Italy in the village, and she remembers the birth. And I got her to write everything down. I said, tell me what it was like when my sister was born. And she still remembers. She still got her, as they say in Italian, cervello. Still got her brain.
Yeah.
She's 90, in her early 90s. And I think, how do you do it? How? I reckon it's all the walking that they do. They go up and down these steps, and she's got.
I think it's the walking. I think it's probably the food, because they don't. I mean, here they pack. Everything's got chemicals in it. I think that, and their exercise and work ethic, like you said, probably a combination of all of those factors.
So I went to see an uncle. So I was catching up with lots of family when I went this year. Met up with my uncle, and I said to him, "How are you?" He had something wrong with his heart. He had a heart procedure, and I arrived at his door. I thought, I'll be in bed. I won't disturb him too much. He's up on his feet. I said, "What are you doing? Go back to bed." He goes, "No." I said, "I'm fine. I had the heart procedure, and I went dancing the next day." He's 87 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
I said, "You've got to take it easy." He's got to take it easy. And he's actually in the John Huston film. He's one of the children comes out of the cave.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, did you know about the film before? When did you learn about that and find that you had family in the film?
So I found, my cousin said to me, because when I was doing all this research with my family, years and years ago, my cousin said to me, "Have you seen that film, the Battle of, no, it's called the Italian Campaign back then."
Yes, yeah.
He goes, "Have you seen it?" And I said, "No." And he said, "It's about the invasion. John Huston directed it." And I said, okay. So I watched it, and then I saw this image of a girl standing next to this lady figure. And when you just go goosebumpy, because we've got no pictures of my parents as children. And I paused at the image and I thought, that's Mum. That's got to be Mum. And I've got someone to analyse the footage, especially a picture of my mum, and they said, yeah, that's her. I said, Mum, I said, this is you when you were 3 years old. And I said, that's your cousin standing behind you, because her cousin hasn't changed, her face is still the same. And moving on a few years, I thought, my dad has got to be in this film. There has to be an image of my dad, because he remembers going in the caves with his sisters. And then I saw the picture of this little boy that resembled my dad. But then I wasn't looking at my dad, I was looking at the two children that were coming out of the caves with him. And the ages fit. I thought my dad was 6, his little brother was 2, and his eldest sister was 2 years older than my dad. I thought, this has got to be the three of them, my dad and his siblings. And again, I had to get the picture of my dad analysed again. And they came back and said, this is your dad.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
unbelievable. I said, Dad, this is, and I took all the evidence to my dad. I said, Dad, this little person in the film is you. He goes, no, it can't be. I said, Dad, it's you. And I said to him, smile. He smiled. I said, turn sideways, let me see your nose. And it was him. It was him. And I said, Dad, this is you. I've got it analysed. A specialist looked at the clip, looked at the pictures of you as the youngest one that we had of my dad. And it was him. And then as you look at all the other images of these people, I saw my grandmother. And she's the lady that wipes her face with a headscarf.
Yes.
I remember that died. It's her. And then we see my dad's cousins. And it's just, it's a strange feeling seeing these children and we recognize them.
That's amazing. That's some story.
Amazing. We've got no images of my mum, and I wish that they'd put that image of my mum in colour, because she had bright blue eyes.
Yeah,
which is quite unusual for Southerners to have blue eyes. She had blue eyes. And it was definitely her. And her mum standing next to her. You can tell that their clothes were torn. They'd been there for so long. Their clothes were torn. They probably hadn't even changed their clothes.
I'm when I put up the blog post, I'm gonna put the YouTube video of the movie so people could see it. It must have been maybe 15 years ago or something like that. My dad was a photographer for the newspaper in New York, the Daily News. And at one point he did newsreels. Back then in the 50s, there was no video, it was newsreels. We were watching a documentary on the Hiltons, the Hotel Hiltons. And they showed Elizabeth Taylor married Nicky Hilton. And she was leaving for Europe. They were leaving on their honeymoon on the boat. And they showed them waving from the boat. And then they panned the crowd real quick. And they went through it. And I said to my wife, my father was in there. My father was at the dock. So she goes, how could you tell that? I said, I know my father. I know the way he stands. I know it, he was there. So she said, oh, you're crazy. I said, so I dug up the YouTube. It happened to be on YouTube, and sure enough, I was able to, like you said, I could freeze it, and it was him. And I it's like, how do you ever catch something like that? And it was so fast.
That's right. It's fast.
But that's something that you were able to see that and catch that. From when I watched it, for anybody watching who's into World War II and things like that, they give the whole story of the battle and what it took to actually capture that small little town
Mm.
was incredible. And then, like you said, they show the people coming out of the caves and everything, and it was very sad. So I have to ask you.
Mm. Yeah.
Your parents are Italian. They live in London. Did your mom cook Italian food, or did she cook English food?
Italian, 100% Italian. We remember because she would cook Italian all the time, and I remember going to a friend's house. Must have been about 8, and it was the first time I saw someone eat fish and chips. That was on a Friday. She was eating fish and chips, and I said to her, "What are you eating? Fish and chips?" And then I went to which wasn't a part of our diet. And then I went to another friend's house. Now eating jam sandwiches for dinner, and I thought, we don't do that. We have pasta, then we have meat, then we have fagioli with them, beans, or salad. But we don't eat that. And the thing is, my parents used to grow their own veg. My dad still does, grows greens, but it was very wholesome. Cakes were homemade, biscuits were homemade wine.
Yeah. So your dad, he made homemade wine.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand how people could eat fish and chips, because to me it looked heavy and stodgy, but that was a part of the English culture. On a Friday, fish and chips. But that was the first time I saw it. The first time I saw jelly was at school. I said to Mum, what is that? What is this? What is this jelly thing? It wasn't us. It wasn't. It was people who'd come round to us and think it was a feast on the table. There was so much food. Did everything. My mum made her own pasta, made gnocchi, and made, because in the back of the book I put the recipe of the tomato, and that was what my mum used to do, and that's what I've passed down to my children. This is what we did.
Yeah, well, we always laugh because when I was a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old or something like that, and when we would go to the beach, we had eggplant parmesan and sausage and peppers, and the white kids had bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, the little machine that my mum used to do to squeeze out the tomato, it's made out of copper. I've got it.
Oh, nice.
They let me have that because it just squeeze all the juices out. I didn't keep the winemaking gadgets because it was too big.
My grandfather used to make it. I vaguely remember it because he died in 1961. So I remember the grapes showing up at the house, and I remember the wine barrels down in the basement, and probably tasted it once or twice with a little water. Back then they would give us the wine with water in it at the table. I vaguely remember the winemaking.
So I'm going to show you this. Look. I don't know if I can pick it up. It's so big. Right, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Tammy Jones. So I've got that belonged to my grandfather. That belonged to my grandfather.
Oh, cool! Wow, that's nice.
3 of them, 3 huge ones. I think my dad thinks I'm potty because I put when we drink wine.
I see the corks.
Yeah. So that used to be my granddad's.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Got small ones, big ones. Yeah, they're quite decorative, really.
You were able to get that from Italy without it breaking?
Well, my dad did. My dad drove him over, and then when he said he didn't want them anymore, I said, I'll take them. So they're just, at home, everyone has to be careful that they don't break them because they're quite delicate. But they're just behind me and I can look at it.
Oh, that's super to have something like that. And even your mom's press for the tomatoes. I'm sure buying that in copper these days would be quite expensive.
Yeah. But yeah, we do. It takes a whole day to make the jarred tomatoes, but it's worth it.
I've because I do most of the cooking. I've never tried making the tomatoes, but when I saw the recipe, I said, I'm going to try.
Yeah,
I'm going to give
it's
it
not.
a try.
See, it's not. Let me have a look. So it's not too. I try to keep it as simple as possible because I know that it can be quite long when you cook and you follow a method. But I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and you have good directions and photos and everything in there, so it's pretty
So
cool.
these are ours. Yeah, and and got the aubergines. So the jarred aubergines.
Yes, yes. Well, when we were in England, I made eggplant parmesan for my British friends, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, "This is aubergine," and I said, "Yes, you've never had this." No, we've never had anything like this before. This is so good.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. It is. I like it. I mean,
it's one of my favorite dishes. Yeah.
Yeah, aubergine. Yeah, it's lovely, lovely, lovely. So I think it's important if you can keep these cooking traditions.
Absolutely, yes, yes. And I have a bunch of recipes for my family on my website too. Some of the old ones, especially some of the cakes and things like that. So before we go, you had one more story in the book that almost like a Romeo and Juliet story.
Oh yes, yeah.
So how did you come across that?
Well, my forbidden fruit.
Yeah,
it's called, isn't it? Forbidden fruit. My grandfather used to tell stories all the time, and he did say that there was one where two young, I'm going to say lovers because they were lovers, wanted to be together, but the families didn't get on. And I do know who she's passed now, one of the mums, who was always sort of tend to cause trouble. I know who she is, but I'm not going to name any of them because it's not fair, and it's just a story that my grandfather told me. And she was a bit of a troublemaker. She caused a feud between these two families, didn't allow the children to interact with each other, their children. But a boy and a girl fell in love.
Yeah.
Fell in love. And it did happen quite a bit back then. Families didn't get on. They wouldn't allow the children to interact or become girlfriend and boyfriend. So my grandfather always used to tell these stories. And I'd say to him, who are they? And he would give me a name, but I didn't really tell anyone who they were. It's sort of private, really. But I thought I'd put it into a story because even though the ending is sad, there is quite a nice positive at the end.
Yeah.
Where they are together.
But like I said, the interesting thing about it, I'm reading it and I'm like, this is like Romeo and Juliet.
I suppose it is.
It's almost, I mean, when you think about it, they couldn't see each other and they stuck around, and I found it very familiar, I guess. And I think to your point, though, back then, a lot of the marriages were arranged. So,
they were very arranged. They were arranged. Matchmaking. My grandmother, she was introduced to my grandfather Serafino, and it was matchmaking. I think I was funny enough. I was told this year because I asked them about that, and my elderly cousin, she said they weren't allowed to be anyway connected by family because being in a village, it was so everyone knew each other, everyone was connected to somehow, but they had to make sure there was no bloodline involved.
Yeah,
which I only found out really this year. yeah. Did you enjoy the story? Did you like it?
Yeah. I enjoyed the whole book.
Because I am really glad, because I always get a bit nervous. I just want people to understand it, and because the names are, you got Benedetto, Serafino, and you got Scholastica, my great grandmother. You've got all these unusual names that people might not might get them a little bit confused, a bit muddled. But was it clear?
Very, and I think what's important for people to know that are listening, to read the book is, again, it's a story about a village that was through no fault of their own or anything like that, just taken over by this war. And, like you said, the people had to go for 6 weeks into a cave. And these stories about the war in Italy are never told.
No, they're not.
There was one other interview I did, I guess maybe a year ago or so, where he told a story about his family, again, not far from Naples, and how they were kind of devastated by the war. And another person that his relatives were at the very end of the war. His grandfather was on a German ship that was sunk by the Allies. And he tells a story about all these lost Italian POWs who were in the Italian army. And they, of course, were fighting as allies for the Germans. And then when the war shifted and they wouldn't, I guess, swear allegiance to the Germans, they made them prisoners of war in their own country.
It's crazy.
It's very very sad.
Before I forget, there's a part in the book about Pasquale Berillo, who went missing.
Oh yes, yeah.
And he ended up in Dachau concentration camp. To research him, I had to be careful, because I had to make sure it was him. And telling the family that I've actually found their grandfather who went missing, it's quite emotional, because they never had closure of where he went, where he ended up.
Yeah. And I bet you there's a lot of stories like that people just, they don't know. Yeah. And again, that's similar to what that story was, because these Italian prisoners on the ship were destined to go to Germany to help, the war effort. And it was very near the end of the war, I think, when that happened. And of course, the Allies had no idea who was on the ship. It was flying the German flag, and that was that.
With the book, sort of, it starts off. I mean, the thread line is the village, San Pietro Infine. It's about the village. But I mentioned about, saying about me being there. It mentions about the chicken. The chicken, when my grandmother's preparing the chicken, that bit where it's a bit and it goes bonkers in the kitchen. I have a phobia of birds.
Because of that?
Because of that. I have a phobia of anything that flies near me. Because of that incident, because of what I saw my grandmother. She was only preparing a chicken, she was getting dinner ready. And that's how they did it back then, because I've never seen it before. So I have a phobia of chickens and anything, feathers, anything that flies around.
And I never experienced that, but I do remember as a kid in New York City, because my grandparents lived in a very Italian neighborhood. The chicken store or whatever you would call it, where they
Oh.
had the live chickens and they would go in and, get the
Yeah,
live chickens.
yeah.
But I never saw that part. So.
Yeah, no, it's a natural thing for them. Get a chicken, it's got a chicken out of a coop, right? Which one should we get? Mirella, which one should we get? Well, I don't know. Get whatever you want and just hang them upside down with the legs. And, yeah, oh dear. But that's the way they were brought up. With me, I couldn't do that. I couldn't even go near anything like that. But.
Well, and that's the point. When we were there and we were eating the ham in Montebello, I said, I've never tasted ham like this. We have, fake Italian ham here in America.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, we still do it the same way we did 200 years ago.
Yeah,
we kill the pig on the day after Christmas and we cure it until March, and now you eat it.
Yeah.
And it was so matter of fact.
Yeah, that's right.
Like everybody's supposed to do that.
Yeah. So that's how they do it.
But and that's the important thing. These mountain villages in Italy, even though they have the modern conveniences, of course, and they have the phones and the cars and all that, they still prepare food. They still do things the way they did it 200, 300 years ago.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Went to see a cousin. She still makes the salami, the cheese.
Yeah.
And it tastes good because it's tasty. It's not processed. It's all fresh meat, fresh, whatever they put in the cheese, and milk or goat's milk, whatever it is. It's all fresh. But my grandmother did teach me how to make an omelette. She taught me how to make an omelette with potatoes. I suppose they call it a Spanish omelette. But she taught me how to make an omelette, and to this day, that's how I make my omelettes. How she taught me.
Yeah, that's great.
Sauces, how she tenderized the meat. I do it exactly how my Nonna Antonia did it. My grandmother.
That's great. Well, you should write a cookbook. That's what you should do.
I should do. No, you should write a cookbook. You've got more recipes.
I've talked about my cousin Linda that I had mentioned earlier. She actually has one. I'll send you the link to her cookbook.
Yeah.
She took all the family recipes and put them into a cookbook, and she's got Sicilian and Naples background, so she's got some Sicilian recipes, some Neapolitan recipes in there.
Yeah, send them over.
She's got a nice book. Well, this has been great. I really, really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to this so much, again, because I enjoyed the book and I enjoyed the stories. I'm kind of, besides being rooted in Italian, I enjoy stories about World War II. So I think it's something that people need to hear or to read, because there were probably 100 towns like that or more in Italy that went through that.
Yeah, cool. But in the book, I tried not to get too deep with the war, because I wrote about the invasion by the Germans and the Americans, what happened. Try not to get too deep into that. It's the stories of my parents and my grandparents that I wanted to sort of share, really, because with any sort of political, you can get a little bit too deep, I think.
No, I think you had the right mixture, and
because I wanted it to be the right balance as well. Because once people start reading about things about war, they feel, no, it's going to be can be a bit tedious when you read it, and I didn't want that at all. I wanted it to be an easy read and short little stories, little bursts of stories, and so I hope I did that.
No, I think you did. I think you captured it very nicely.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you.